No. Okay, you can watch it if you want. Don't get me wrong, I've always liked the original Matrix film and the concept itself, but the most recent sequel to the trilogy is one of the most clear and obvious cash grabs. Not only is it released on HBO Max and theaters simultaneously on December 22nd, but the majority of the film is just about reminiscing on the past 3 films. I guess that would have made for a better title. The CGI is great and the action sequences never fail, but the writing is where it dips exponentially in quality. This will include spoilers, but trust me, that word doesn't mean much for this movie. Wait! Wait! If you like this video, don't forget to like and subscribe. If you don't want to do it for me, do it for him. As great as it is to see Keanu Reeves and Carrie-Anne reprise their roles as the fated duo Neo and Trinity, I forgot to mention Lawrence Fishburn did not return as his iconic character Morpheus. The writing feels empty, devoid of consequence. The pair were thought to have died saving Zion, the last human civilization on Earth in the future, amidst tyrannous machines, only to be revived for what we can only assume to be financial gain for Warner Bros. Though the old Zion is gone, 60 years later, there exists a new city that has managed to hide from the machines by using advanced technology, similar to Wakanda actually, that works as a deus ex machina, which admittedly is a character in the 3rd film, or plot device for humans in the real world to do their bidding. Whether it's Sadie's robot creature that can turn invisible and be able to rescue Trinity, or the nanotech version of Morpheus that can conveniently float into the chamber Trinity is being imprisoned in. Similar to Tony Stark's nanotech that served as a plot device in Avengers Infinity War and Endgame, which personally was something I didn't like about the Avengers films. Now obviously the film itself is leaning heavily on meta-analysis. Warner did the same exact thing when they brought back Animaniacs, a 90s animated TV show where 3 anthropomorphic dogs wreak havoc on Warner Bros. Studios. They hired Neil Patrick Harris to give us a 5-minute monologue on how The Matrix is back. And after a while, you start to think to yourself, okay, we get it. There's also a number of one-offs that are intended to make the audience laugh, but I heard maybe one guy in the audience let out a ha! Yes, I unfortunately watched this in the theater. The only time I actually laughed was when Neo tried to fly, but that was mostly because other people were laughing. The new villain's cat, which is prevalent throughout the trilogy as a symbol of a glitch in the Matrix, is just named Deja Vu. It's just way too on the nose there, and it feels kind of lazy. Neo's Matrix persona Thomas Anderson invented a video game that is literally clips from the Matrix films, and I know in the past plenty of films and TV shows have just used clips and pretended like it was something else, just, you know, for the sake of not having to spend more money and time on production. So I would understand that, but with this kind of film, you know, a film that already feels empty, it's adding a lot more displeasure to it, in my opinion. I mean, tell me why they couldn't have used their enormous budget to CGI a video game version, or at least hire developers to make a mock game. Obviously, Keanu alone and the CGI would eat up a good chunk of that, but there's not that much CGI in it, unless they were too lazy to make actual sets, and I just couldn't tell. Speaking of sets, they did have some good ones that weren't used much. After Neo was incarcerated and forced to stay in the Rapunzel Tower within the human city, I expected a montage of jump cuts with him trying to obtain his power again, but he spent maybe 1 minute in there before being broken out by the Mnemosyne crew, who received no punishment after jeopardizing the lives of everyone within the city in order to rescue Trinity. I imagine that while the Wachowski sisters, who are trans directors formerly known as Larry and Andy Wachowski, were eager to work with today's CGI technology, they were disappointed themselves with Resurrection's writing restrictions, Though after Ready Player One and Animaniacs, we're aware of Warner Bros. Desire to optimize pop culture for money. According to the film's Wikipedia page, the sisters expressed disinterest in reviving the franchise for a fourth film, prompting a screenplay written without them before Lana claimed the role as director, likely to make sure Warner Bros. Didn't tarnish their most prominent works. After beginning production shortly before the pandemic started, she considered tossing the entire project, but surprisingly the cast wanted to see the end of the film, though I'm not sure if that was Riza Moss or the new members who simply wanted to be a part of the franchise. Circling back to consequences, there are virtually none. Robots programmed by humans in the real world are used, like in the first film, to secure Neo's escape without being seen at all, which I would like to know why these AI, who managed to destroy most of the human race, can't have even one squid watching his pod at all times, especially considering how Harris's character, the analyst, referenced how expensive it was to revive them after their deaths in the Machine City, which also refers to the film's budget itself. Smith's character, existing now through Jonathan Groff as Anderson's boss, becomes an anti-hero of sorts when he rescues Neo and Trinity from the analyst, despite having been mortal enemies and being killed as well in the third film, and his existence in the Matrix is never really explained. By the end of the film, the analyst has been castrated after losing control over the two within both the real world and the Matrix, and Trinity just toys with him and enters creative mode, and Neo is able to as well after not having been able to fly for the entire film despite having been able to in the previous films. None of Neo's crew dies, and humans in the real world are no closer to gaining freedom from the Matrix and the machines. The franchise didn't progress at all. They simply re-entered a loop of their own creation. The film received 69% on Rotten Tomatoes, but more interesting are the reviews the film critics left on this page. So let me read some out to you. So Luke Goodsell says, "The film's execution doesn't always match its wild ideas. This is an exaltation of thoughtless mediocrity," says Grace Lavery of Bitch Media. Diane Carson says, "Like Neo, co-writer director Lana Wachowski has been lured back to the franchise. I would have been more satisfied to leave it alone." Yeah, Diane, I wholeheartedly agree with you. Lanita Cook says it's a little bit on the nose. Ed Whitfield says, "One of the most passive-aggressive mainstream movies of recent years. A film that both mocks the expectations of its imagined audience and the crude franchise revival imperative of its financial backers." Yeah. Chris Knight says, "In the end, the newest Matrix amounts to little more than a half-baked noodle." Here are some good reviews. "The Wachowskis pioneered the modern cinema we know and love. It's fitting that the Matrix is back to resurrect it." Samuel R. Murrian says, "Somehow electrifyingly optimistic and satirical, fleetingly farcical even, and it still earnestly furthers a series of tantalizing meditations on themes like choice and fate, and of course tech. Wachowski admirably, unguardedly makes this personal." Who the fuck is this guy? If you're an avid fan of the Matrix trilogy, you might like this film, or you may be as disappointed as I was. The film tries to be funny through the irony of its existence, but the tricks can only go on for so long before it's just lazy. And that's how I personally perceive it compared to The Matrix, Reloaded, and Revolutions, which are actually good films, despite more limited CGI capabilities. I hope this is the last we hear of The Matrix, at least until Warner pays the Wachowski sisters enough to once again disrupt the grave of the Matrix trilogy. It was simply too caught up in maintaining nostalgia for guaranteed success that it diminished any opportunity for a new story. And that's why I'm giving it a 5 out of 10. It's still visually appealing, but other than that, it's just nostalgia baiting. I just felt bored near the end of the film, and when it was over, it felt as if Warner was trying to write Revolutions out of existence in order to secure Neo, Trinity, Morpheus, and Smith for the next installment, which will likely come with or without the aid of the Wachowskis. And it did also feel much like Warner Bros. Was riding off of the success of the John Wick franchise, in which Keanu does star in as the lead. And it just felt like with this film, Keanu was being Keanu. Fans of films that Keanu has been in were all well aware of Keanu's unique personality, and it just feels like with Matrix Resurrections that they were just writing Keanu to the audience. And that's why I personally would like to pretend that this film was just not made and that the trilogy just exists by itself, because it is honestly probably better that way.